One ordinary Thursday, my boss asked if I wanted a quick drink after work. I said yes. What followed was quiet, careful, and unexpectedly tender. A conversation that steadied my heart, challenged my fears, and opened a door I did not know I was ready to walk through. That night changed. If this story resonates, please like, subscribe, and share. Settle in, breathe, and listen with me through the journey today. My name is Jordan Hale, and for most of my 30s, my life could be summed up in one word: steady. I lived in a small walk-up apartment in Chicago's Lakeview neighborhood, on a street lined with maple trees that knew when to flame into amber and when to let go. I worked in patient experience at Lakeshore Medical Center, a big hospital system tucked between the quiet strength of neighborhoods and the wind that came in stubborn from the lake. I took the red line to work, I brewed my coffee black, and I made lists in a notebook with ruled lines that calmed me the moment my pen touched down. Steady, predictable, safe. My job was not flashy. I listened. Families who loved someone in our care needed a steady voice. Nurses who felt overlooked needed a steady ear. Doctors who had spoken too quickly needed someone to help repair trust with careful words. There is a particular kind of tenderness in making room for someone's fear, and in my little corner of the hospital, that tenderness was my craft. The person who taught me to take that work seriously, without taking myself too seriously, was my boss, Michael Reyes. Michael was 45 then. He was the director of patient experience and the kind of leader I had learned to admire very quietly. No grand speeches, no performative inspections. He did what my grandmother in Ohio would have called good, honest work. He had this way of listening that did not rush anyone and did not let anyone linger in a loop of despair. He would tilt his head, soften his eyes, and ask the kind of questions that made the tension in a room slide away. He wore dark blue suits and a silver watch with a scratch on the face he never bothered to fix. He kept a small plant on his desk that leaned toward the window like it believed. I learned his rhythms like a steady pulse. I did not learn his secrets. On that Thursday in October, the hospital day had been long. A patient, a veteran named Arthur, had been waiting too long for discharge. His daughter Ellen was exhausted and angry in a way only love can make you. She had been promised 3 times that the pharmacy would have his meds ready. It did not. We fixed it, but the repair came late. The apology was mine. Michael stood with me in the hallway outside Arthur's room while I explained what we had done and how we would prevent it from happening again. I held eye contact, I kept my voice calm, and I did not try to dodge accountability. It was the kind of moment our office was built for. And still, when the conversation ended and the elevator doors finally slid shut on our floor, I felt my body sag like someone had untied a knot inside my chest. We walked together toward the lobby. The fluorescent lights hummed. The volunteer at the welcome desk gave us a tired wave. I could see the evening through the glass doors. Chicago in the fall looks like it is being painted in real time. Michael glanced at me and I expected the debrief. He was good at helping us put a day back in its box. Instead, he said, "You did good work today, Jordan. Do you have plans? I could use a short walk and a simple drink." A simple drink. The words were so gentle they made me smile. He added quickly, with a small, almost apologetic gesture, "If you're heading home, that's fine. It's been a day." I told him yes. It surprised me how natural the yes felt. We stepped out into the cool. The sky was that soft blue that almost glows, like it knows the sun is slipping but is not ready to admit it. We walked a few blocks to a place he liked on Wells, a quiet spot with warm lamps and honest chairs that did not pretend to be anything they were not. The bartender greeted Michael by name, which made me pause, then softened me. "Everyone needs a place to put down their day." We took a small table near the window. He ordered an old-fashioned low sugar. I asked for a club soda with lime and later a small bourbon. We were, after all, steady people. We eased into the evening. I do not know when our conversation slid from work into something else. It felt like a turn you do not notice until you are on a new street, and then you laugh because you do not mind. He asked me what grounded me when a day ran long. I thought about my lists and my lake walks and the way I have always folded laundry like it was prayer. He listened. He told me about Sundays, about how he cooks rice slowly, letting the steam do the work, because his grandmother taught him that patience is a spice. He told me about his son, Gabriel, 18, with a lanky kindness and an eye for photography. He mentioned, almost as if he were checking the bravery of the air between us, that he was divorced, and that the version of himself he had been in his 20s had learned certainty like a script. He did not say much more than that. He did not have to. In the careful way he paused, I heard the thing he was not rushing. There is a way to talk about a wound that your body recognizes as healing. That is what it felt like. I did not flirt. Not with my boss. Not in a city where rumors were faster than trains. But I let myself lean into the comfort of conversation the way you might lean into a chair you trust. If you have ever been lonely, not in a dramatic way, but in a safe, steady life that had somehow misplaced surprise, you might understand the relief in that. We talked about Chicago. We talked about music. He liked Bill Withers and Alicia Keys. I liked old Sam Cooke records my father kept in dusty sleeves when I was a kid. He asked, in a tone both curious and careful, about the first time I said the word gay out loud. I told him it happened late for me, that I tried to be the good son and the good worker, and that sometimes people confuse quiet with straight. He nodded. He did not push. We stepped back into work talk, then out. It was a gentle tide. When we left the bar, the streetlights were on. The bus on Wells sighed to a stop and then pulled away. I felt that clean, surprising lightness you get after a good cry, except I had not cried. Michael looked at me like he wanted to say something and then decided not to. He put his hands in the pockets of his coat. We stood at the corner long enough for the walk signal to change twice. He said, "This helped. Thank you." And then he asked, with that small tilt of his head that meant he was asking me as a person, not as my boss, "Do you want to walk to the train together?" We did. When the red line swallowed me into its warm, familiar noise, I sat with my palm open on my knee and watched my breath steady. It is such a simple thing, breathing. If you are listening to me now and your day has been a hard one, I want to invite you to breathe with me. Inhale, exhale, because that night, I remembered in my body that I had a life I could move through, not just a calendar I could manage. Over the next few weeks, the steadiness of our rhythms continued. The hospital did what hospitals do. It demanded presence, patience, and energy you had to choose. I helped a nurse named Lila who had been snapped at by a surgeon find her way back to feeling respected. We set up a small conversation that did not fix the past but repaired a piece of trust in the present. Michael sent an email that was both clear and kind. People think those are opposites. They are not. On a Wednesday morning, I found a folded note on my desk written in Michael's compact hand. Coffee walk, and a time. The walk became a gentle ritual. We would step outside, cradle paper cups in our palms, and give ourselves 10 minutes to be human. We never defined it, but we protected it the way you protect a candle from a sudden gust. If we talked about work, we did it with the soft edges that made solutions possible. If we talked about life, we did it like people who knew life is not a project. Something in me grew quieter and braver at the same time. On a Friday in November, one of our long-term patients died. His name was Mr. Whitaker, and he had the kind of smile that made you think he had practiced it for someone he loved and then decided to give it to everyone. I had known him for months. The chaplain called me after lunch. I walked to the family room and met his wife and son. I did the work I was trained to do. I did not say too much. Sometimes, you do not have to hold everything for people. You can let the room hold some of it. Afterward, in my office, I sat very still. Michael knocked and waited, like he always did. I looked up and shook my head in that small way that means, "Please do not make me talk yet." He nodded and pulled up a chair. He sat quietly for 5 full minutes. It felt like someone was steadying the ground. When he did speak, he kept his voice low. "I'm here." That was it. You learn things about a person in the way they handle silence. You learn what they think you are capable of and what they believe is theirs to fix. In that silence, the edge of something unnamed between us softened into something named care. Let me say this clearly, because I know someone who has lived a life, someone who has been around a workplace or two, might be worried about the boundaries here. I was too. I was not interested in being a story whispered in the hallways. I did not want to complicate the job that paid my rent and gave my days purpose. I did not want to place Michael in a position where anyone could question the fairness that was his anchor. That worry was part of what gave our pace dignity. We did not rush. We did not pretend we were not people. We moved like you move when you carry something that matters. Carefully. The first time we were honest about it was an evening in early December, when the air had that cold that makes your nostrils sting and reminds you you are alive. The hospital had a holiday potluck, and I, true to form, brought a simple casserole that tasted better than it looked. People made their rounds, told their same jokes, hugged a little tighter than they would in March, and went home a little later than they meant to. I stayed until the custodian flickered the lights and laughed. On my way to the elevator, I passed Michael's office and saw his lamp still on. I knocked. He looked up and smiled with relief like a person who had been found. "Come in," he said. I was just finishing the mountain of emails. He leaned back, rubbed the spot above his eyebrow that got tight when he had pushed himself too hard, and gestured to the chair across from him. "How are you doing, Jordan?" That is a simple question. But when a person means it, it does not feel simple. "I'm okay," I said. "I'm tired, but okay," he nodded. He looked at his hands. He moved them as if positioning words in the air and then stopped. "I need to say something to you," he said finally. He took a breath, and I felt in that moment the way fear can be both a friend and a guard. Whatever this is between us, it has made me better at my job. It has made me kinder with myself. And it has made me feel something I did not expect to feel in this season of my life." He paused. He looked at me, not through me, not past me, not down at a script, but at me. "I like you," he said. "Not as your boss, as a man." The room felt both very small and very safe. My heartbeat made a small noise in my ears. I realized I had been leaning forward, as if there were a wind that could push me over and I needed to counter it. I set my hands on my knees. I matched his honesty with my own. "I like you too," I said. "And I am frightened by that," he nodded. "Me too." He let out a breath that sounded like he had been holding it since August. "I don't want to be careless with your life or with mine, or with this place." "We could talk to HR, I said, surprising myself with how quickly the sentence formed. It sounded like I was reaching for a handrail. Ask what would need to happen if... At some point, this turned into something more. Transfers, disclosures, guardrails. I could see his shoulders relax. It is powerful to realize that responsibility can be shared. "Yes," he said. "That is what I was hoping you would say. We did not hold hands. We did not collide into a kiss. We did not make a promise we were not ready to keep. We picked up our coats. We made a plan. On Monday, we would request a confidential conversation with HR. That weekend, I cleaned my apartment. Not because anyone was coming over, but because sometimes you prepare the room inside you by tending to the room around you. I vacuumed the corners. I wiped down the kitchen counter like it was a page I wanted to write on. I took a long walk along the lake. The cold put color in my cheeks and made the world clear. I allowed myself to imagine what it could feel like to be met in my life with gentleness and steadiness by someone who could see me and still be seen. I let myself name the word that had stayed curled at the edge of my mouth, love. Not the crash of it, not the fireworks, but the slow, patient build, the sturdy bench you sit on and think, this could hold us. The meeting with HR was both careful and human. I have learned that those two qualities are possible together when people choose them. We sat with a woman named Alicia, who had been at the hospital for 15 years and carried a pen that clicked as she listened. We told the truth. We said we were feeling something more than collegial respect, and we did not want to hide. We asked about policies. She thanked us for coming in before lines had blurred. She was clear. Because Michael was my direct supervisor, any relationship between us would require one of us to move roles to remove the reporting line. There would need to be a disclosure and a plan to protect fairness and trust. She did not treat us like a scandal waiting to happen. She treated us like adults making a careful choice. Michael offered to take the administrative inconvenience. He said it with the kind of quiet that made me trust him more, not less. We spoke to his boss. We arranged, with genuine relief, that I would shift to a related team within the larger patient experience division. reporting to a different manager named Tamara, who had the kind of laugh that made people believe in Mondays. My work would remain the same. My integrity would remain intact. Our timeline would be thoughtful. We would not announce anything. We would move, step by careful step, toward more honesty. It took 6 weeks to shape that change in a way that felt respectful and sensible. During those weeks, Michael and I kept our friendship steady, our coffee walks gentle, and our boundaries clean. The first time we called it a date, I wore a blue sweater my sister had given me last Christmas because she said it made my eyes look like the sky right before it wants to rain. We met at a small Italian place on Clark Street that a nurse on our unit swore by. It had paper on the tables you could draw on if you wanted to write down a thought you did not want to lose. We did not draw. We talked, we ate. We smiled in the kind of way that happens when you see the outlines of a life you could love and think, is it possible this is mine? He told me about his childhood in San Antonio. He told me about the quiet ache that followed his divorce and the way he had filled too much of that ache with work until he realized that he was not healing, just numbing. He admitted, carefully, that he had only said the word gay about himself out loud in a therapist's office a little over a year ago. I felt my chest fill with an emotion that did not try to name itself before it was ready, something like tenderness with responsibility tucked inside. I told him about my father's habit of whistling through his teeth and my mother's way of making comfort out of biscuits when the world pressed in. I told him about the first man I ever loved and how that love had taught me how not to leave myself again. We did not talk about the future like it was our job to guarantee it. We talked about the present like it was a room we could arrange with care. As winter pressed into the city, so did the shape of us. We found a stride. We did the small things that make a life. On Saturdays, we would pause at a farmer's market indoors on Division and pick up apples that tasted like October even in January. We learned the pace of each other's mornings. Michael liked to sit at the table with a newspaper, the real kind, folded into a neat square, and sip coffee like he was in conversation with it. I liked to move a little faster, rinse the dishes, wipe the counters, make the bed, and then sit. We learned to meet each other halfway. If you have ever built something that matters, you know that halfway is sometimes the most loving place to choose. At work, I settled into my new role with Tamara. She welcomed me with a warm grin and exactly one ground rule. Kind is non-negotiable, she said. We can do hard things, but we do them kind. In that new rhythm, I found myself freer to let the rest of my life breathe. It is amazing how much energy hiding takes. When you stop, your body notices. We were deliberate about how we showed up. We did not make a show of anything, at the hospital or at home. We told the colleagues who needed to know. We learned to say my partner without swallowing the words. We built habits like bricks. On Sunday evenings, we cooked a simple meal, rice and roasted vegetables, broiled salmon, a stew that made the kitchen smell like promises, and then wrote down 3 good things from the week. Sometimes they were so small you could have missed them. A good laugh with the security guard at the front desk, a bright scarf on a stranger, a moment of silence that held. Other times they stretched. A comment from a patient's mother that said, "I feel seen." A hard conversation with a physician that ended with gratitude. We did not judge the size of the good things. We just collected them. When spring arrived, the wind off the lake softened, and people in the city remembered how to smile without their teeth chattering. Michael and I walked more. We went to the Art Institute and stood in front of the Surat. The pointillism made us laugh because it reminded us that patience can turn tiny dots into a whole afternoon. In Grant Park, he reached for my hand like he was reaching for a well-lived truth. I let him have it, and I had it too. There were hard parts. Of course there were. Kindness does not mean softness everywhere. And love, real love, does not erase your history. One afternoon, 3 months after we had told the truth to HR, a complaint came anonymously to the compliance line. It said that I had gotten a promotion because I was dating my boss. It implied that I was not to be trusted. My stomach dipped when Tamara forwarded the message to me and suggested we meet. We did what we always did. We named what was true. I had not been promoted. My role had changed laterally. We had documented everything. We had done the work to make our boundaries clear. Tamara sat with me, her face calm, and said, We will handle this the same way we handle everything, with honesty, with process, with care. She worked with HR to pull a neat packet together that showed the timeline, the policy, the sign-offs. Michael recused himself from anything that had his fingerprints on our structure, just as he should. A week later, the matter was closed. I sat on my couch that night with a glass of water and put my hand on my chest. I thanked the younger version of me who had been too afraid of his own life to risk something tender. I told him we were okay. When I told my mother over the phone, on a Sunday afternoon when she had just pulled her cornbread from the oven, and you could hear the pride in her voice even when she put you on speaker, that I was dating someone, she said, "Is he kind to you?" When I answered yes, she said, "Then I am happy." Parents want words like safe and stable. I gave her those too. I told her he was responsible. I told her he listened. Then, with the honesty that makes futures possible, I told her he had been my boss and that we had done the right thing about that. She paused. Then she said, "Thank you for telling me in the right order." We laughed. My father, who has a way of showing love by fixing things, asked if he should bring his toolkit when he visited this summer. "Bring it," I said. "There's a loose shelf that could use your attention." He chuckled. You learn not to demand a person change their language of love. You just meet them there. Michael told his ex-wife, Tina, with the same gentle straightforwardness he used in the rest of his life. She listened, asked the good questions, then said, "I want you happy, and I want Gabriel to know you as you are." His son took a minute, then a day, then sent a text that said, "Cool, so long as he treats you right." The next time we all stood in the same kitchen to pass around a pizza box, Gabriel looked at me and asked about good camera shops in the city. We found a place on Milwaukee that did repairs and sold old lenses to people who still loved film. We went there the following Saturday. By the time we left, Gabriel had a second-hand lens and I had a friend. Family takes all sorts of shapes. What matters in the end is that it holds. Summer found us slow on weekends and steady in the heat. We tried a small vacation, 3 days in Michigan, where the morning light came through the blinds like it had something to say. We sat by the water and said less than you might expect. When you are with someone who knows how to listen to quiet, you do not have to perform your joy. You can just have it. We had our first argument in July. It was not about anything that would make a dramatic scene in a movie. We were planning a schedule. His son needed help with something that overlapped with a hospital meeting I could not move. And we both needed to feel like we mattered. Our voices raised, then stopped. He went for a walk around the block. I did the dishes methodically, like the warm water could soak the impatience off my fingers. When he came back, he opened the door with a softness that told me he had talked to himself the way a good friend would. "I want to do this well," he said. "I want to learn how to plan a life that leaves neither of us feeling squeezed out." I nodded. "Me too." We sat, not side by side, but across from each other, and each named how we had learned to not be left. We told the truth about scarcity and what it had taught us. Then we pulled out our calendars like people who believe there is enough. Later that night, he put his hand over my hand and said, "Thank you for not making me be the perfect version of myself to be loved." "I don't need perfect," I said. "I need present." In September, Michael scared me. He woke up with a tightness in his chest that did not feel like ordinary stress. We went to urgent care. I watched the nurse's face as she took his vitals. I watched the doctor's eyes soften when she said she thought it was anxiety, not his heart, but that she wanted to do a few more tests just to be sure. I held his hand while we waited. I found my voice taking on that calm cadence I use with families at work. Breathe in, breathe out. We are here. The EKG was normal. The blood work was fine. The doctor recommended a slower pace and, if he was willing, a return to the therapist who had once given him the language he needed. In the car on the way home, we counted our breath in 4s together, and I remembered that love looks like a lot of things, but one of its signatures is the way it steadies a body. We made small adjustments. He blocked off time on his calendar the way you would set out medicine for the week, non-negotiable. We took short walks after dinner. He went back to therapy. I learned to tell him when the weight of other people's stories was leaning too hard on me so he could help me set it down. We learned the difference between being strong and being stubborn. As the leaves turned again, I found myself standing in Michael's kitchen, stirring a pot of something that would make the house smell like Sunday, and feeling, with complete clarity, that the life I had quietly watched from the sidelines was a life I was allowed to be inside. I did not feel like a guest in my own days. I felt like a person who had been invited to sit down and stay. One evening in October, a year after that simple drink, Michael looked up from his book and said, like he was testing the temperature of a pool with his toe, "How would it feel if we lived in the same place?" He kept his face open. My heart did what it does when it wants two things, a soft yes and a careful wait. I smiled because the picture of us sharing a kitchen, sharing a bathroom mirror, sharing how we stored our groceries and folded our sheets, made me feel both brave and deeply calm. "I would like that," I said. "Let's do it in a way that honors us," he nodded. We did not rush. We made lists like grown men who had lived enough life to know that logistics are a love language. We talked about neighborhood, about noise, about how much sunlight we each needed. We found an apartment with a little balcony that faced the morning. The first morning there, I made coffee slow. He read the paper. I set out 2 mugs. We stood on the balcony in bare feet and watched the city wake. We adopted a rescue dog with serious eyes and a softness for naps. We named him Harbor because that is what we had become to each other, a place to pull in and rest. Sometimes I think about the moment in that quiet bar when Michael used the word simple to describe a drink. We have had simple moments, but the thing that matters is not simplicity. It is clarity. It is the choice to make your life as honest as you can tolerate, and then patiently, a little more honest than that. It is the decision to be careful not because you are brittle, but because you are strong. People think carefulness is fear. It is not. Carefulness is an active tenderness. It is a posture. It is a way of moving through a world that deserves your full presence. When people ask me now how we began, I tell them we began with listening. We began with a careful drink and a generous silence. We began by telling the truth early enough to give it shape. We began by naming our boundaries, not because love needed to be contained, but because it needed a structure it could flourish inside. I tell them that a good relationship does not protect you from the weather. It gives you a coat, an umbrella, and a person whose hand you can hold while the wind does what wind does. Sometimes, at dinner with friends, someone will raise an eyebrow and ask, and they mostly mean well, "Wasn't it messy? You know, because he was your boss?" And I say, "It could have been. It isn't." And then I explain how the choices we made were not glamorous, but were the kind that your grandmother would have nodded at. We talked. We planned. We did not ask for forgiveness later. We asked for guidance early. The romantic in me is still there. He just has a day planner now. Last December, we went back to the bar where it began. The bartender recognized Michael and me and slid 2 waters toward us while we took off our scarves. We sat by the window. Snow was starting to fall in those hesitant flakes that look like they are gathering courage. We told the story back to each other like a bedtime story you never get tired of. Michael laughed at the way I folded my hands when he first asked me to walk to the train. I teased him about the scratch on his watch he still had not fixed. We thanked each version of ourselves for getting us here. The one who had grabbed courage with both hands, the one who had stayed steady when fear knocked, the one who had learned how to ask for help. If you have lived a few decades, you know that gratitude is a muscle. You choose it. You build it. A song came on in the bar. One of those easy songs you know by heart before you realize you know it. He reached over and touched my wrist, just a simple touch, a small, warm place. "I'm glad we didn't hurry," he said. "Me too," I answered. "I'm glad we didn't hide." On the walk home, we took a longer route than we had to. That is one of the luxuries of a life you love. You are not always racing it. We stopped on a corner where the lamplight made a little cone of warmth. He kissed me, soft, sure, and it did not feel like a movie. It felt like an ordinary miracle, which is to say, it felt real. If you are listening and you have been carrying around a quiet ache, I want to offer you this. You do not have to go looking for fireworks. You can cultivate a small, steady flame. You can tell the truth at a pace you can absorb. You can be brave and careful at the same time. And sometimes, a simple drink at a small table will turn the light on in a new room of your life, and you will see, in the good company of your own breath, that you are allowed to walk in.